Alright guys, it's Ann Blackwood, your Silicon Valley Sage Sister, here to bring consciousness to the forefront of your daily life to make life a little kinder and simpler. And my phone's acting up, so I'm gonna be using this camera. It's crap, but for one video. C'est la vie. So I want to talk about something kind of topical that's happened in the last day, which is the Free Britney movement and her coming out and speaking on, well, in the court via Zoom. And I feel like I want to talk about this and can talk about this because of my psychology background. I have a degree in psychology. That's what got me into counseling to begin with, was actually moving down a road through psychology, because I saw what the psychiatric community industry was doing to people, and it's abuse, a lot of it. And I didn't like that. So I wanted to get into psychology because I saw how talk therapy was so beneficial to myself and others, and wanted to be a light in a dark place. So I wanted to talk about this Free Britney thing for a minute because I'm not a big Britney Spears fan. And I haven't really kept up on all this, and I really wasn't super aware of Britney Spears' life to begin with. But there were a few things that really stood out to me when I hear the story that are like big red flags for me. Because you see stuff in passing, because you're a human being in the world, especially in America. So I want to point out a couple of things that have really stood out to me. One of which is that in the beginning of this, it was clear that she shaved her head and had her little emotional breakdown as a sort of spiteful retort to everything that was going on. And so the fact that they were able to take that and turn that into a dementia diagnosis, big red flags for anybody who knows anything about psychology, let alone psychiatry. Britney Spears never had dementia. Dementia is something that happens to brains where, for whatever reason, your memory, your ability to do things is impaired, and in a massive, massive way. So like something that would be considered dementia would be like Alzheimer's, where you go see grandma every week and she thinks you're Uncle Joey when really you're her granddaughter. You know, that's dementia. Someone who literally can't feed themselves. Like, the brain deteriorates or stops functioning in a massive way when you have dementia. Britney Spears never had dementia. She had pop star spitefully rebelling against the system. Ensha. The girl, she was stressed out, but I talk about this all the time with people. You don't have to have trauma to be an everyday person with poor mental health. And Britney Spears has her fair share of trauma too, I'm sure. But you don't have to have a mental disorder. You don't have to have a mental illness. You don't have to have trauma to have poor mental health. So it starts there with this story of Britney Spears, where they managed to put her on this conservatorship. For those who aren't aware of what's going on, let me catch you up to speed. Britney Spears has been, I should have probably started with this. Britney Spears has been under a conservatorship for the last 13 years. She is 39, which means that this happened to her when she was 27, if I've got the math right. Wait, hold on. It doesn't matter. Either way, she's 39 now. This happened to her in her mid to late 20s. For this last 13 years, she has had her dad and these financial firms in control of her entire life. And when you hear her talk in court the way she did yesterday, apparently for the first time, it just verifies all of the abuse that we suspected was going on. I have some friends who are really aware and into the Free Britney movement, so I've heard them talk about it, which is why I want to talk about this now. This goes on every day in America, and it's really sad that people get the opportunity to abuse the system and abuse people and abuse the system at the same time. And so you take someone like Britney Spears, who was a perfectly healthy adult, and she has one moment of, screw you guys, I don't want to be beautiful anymore, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm not happy with where my life's going, so I'm going to shave my head and try to get away from these people. And they turn that into a dementia diagnosis. And I honestly think that they did that to get the most control possible, because I think without a dementia diagnosis, had they just considered it an anxiety attack, or some sort of anxiety or mental breakdown, that wouldn't have given them the right to go for a full conservatorship. This is how the system is abused all the time. You get a doctor who will write you a diagnosis that's BS. This happens in the psychiatric industry all the time. They did it with me personally. When I was a teenager. Granted, there was no abuse or anything like that, but I've seen how you can pay for a diagnosis in the psychiatric industry, because they did it with me when I was a teenager. I was given a bipolar diagnosis, even though I was not in any way, and am not in any way, bipolar. I've talked about that in other videos, where they took one single sentence that I said and turned that into an entire bipolar diagnosis. And had I not said that one single sentence, they would have had nothing to work with. But I said, you know what? There are a lot of sad things going on in my life right now, but I'm really good at looking on the bright side and making myself happy again. They turned that into a bipolar diagnosis. Like literally, my parents were going through a divorce. They were fighting. I was moving around. I wasn't going to school. There were a lot of sad things going on in my life, but I was really good at looking on the bright side. That's not being bipolar. That's being good at dealing with crap that's being thrown on your plate. Anyway, this is how this happens. And so now for the last 3 years, Britney Spears has been blackmailed, basically, it sounds like, into doing all sorts of stuff she doesn't want to do, having no privacy, being forced to take medication that she should have never been on. It sounds like, to me, they took her being disagreeable once and turned that around on her to get her on even harder medication. They talk about her being on lithium. She should have never been on lithium, as far as I can tell. That doesn't make any sense. So, lithium is for again, like I don't know about someone with dementia, but someone with a hardcore mental illness, like dementia. Lithium is not for someone who's just a little upset with what's going on right now. Lithium is certainly not for someone who's had a nervous breakdown, which is basically what happened to her. Was she had a nervous breakdown, and people took that and turned it on her and used it against her to literally control her. And they were saying that there was one account that had $600 million in it. I mean, if that's just one account, imagine how much money is tied to Britney Spears' name. Unfortunately, in this world, there are awful people who like to take advantage of people for power and money. So it's really sad that people were able to do this. But what's notable to me most of all is that they weren't supposed to be able to record, but somebody recorded Britney Spears' testimony yesterday. And I found it very interesting because sitting and listening to it with someone else, I thought she sounded clear, pretty clear, mentally clear, considering with the person I was listening to it, because they came in like 2/3 of the way into it, thought she sounded incoherent. And the thing about this that you have to keep in mind is that psychiatric medications can take a normal, healthy brain and make it seem incoherent. This is the tricky trick. So I know people who really desperately need to be on psychiatric medication, but it doesn't work for them because those who need it the most, it works for the least. And a lot of them end up not being on anything because it makes them feel worse than they already feel. And that's really sad, because if someone is genuinely mentally ill, but the medications make them worse, not better, we're doing something wrong. And I find the people that they work best for are the ones who actually don't need it and could really just use some talk therapy and getting over their stuff, because their brain isn't actually chemically imbalanced. They're just having a bad day, having a bad year, having a bad couple of years, and have never learned to deal with it, whatever that might have looked like. So I really think that at the end of the day with this whole Britney thing, she deserves to, at the very minimum, have the previous conservatorship wiped out, and she should be given the opportunity to pick her own team of people to help her get back on track, because she should have never been in this conservatorship for as long as it's gone on, as far as I can tell, especially having my background in psychology. And you know, at this point, she's been on medication for long enough. She's been in these situations for long enough that she probably, at the very least, is going to need to wean off the medication. It might have permanently messed up her brain, so she might need to be put on a different medication. I don't know. I don't know the situation well enough, but from what I can tell, she needs a transition team around her that's not trying to take advantage of her, to help her transition out of the conservatorship back into her real life, her autonomous life, because she deserves it. Gosh, all of the things that they were talking about, that I heard her talk about, it's so sad how people take advantage of people and the system to have control over money and power. So I'm really interested to see where this goes, because hopefully the judge will help her get out of this conservatorship. Now, one of the things I noticed was that Britney wanted to get out of the conservatorship without being evaluated again. But from what I can tell of the way Britney talks about evaluation, she thinks that's sitting in a room 4 days a week being like tested. And I would, if I had been going through that for the better part of the last 13 years, I would be scared of evaluation too. But not all evaluations have to be that intense. I mean, my bipolar diagnosis evaluation was like, I think done in 1 or 2 sittings over a couple of hours, like 2 at the most. So, you know, like, I think if Britney could wrap her mind around the fact that they might really want her to be evaluated again, that would be in her best interest. But the person evaluating her shouldn't be someone picked by the conservatorship. Like, this is a no-brainer. They should be able to find somebody who is impartial that they can bring in to Britney's home in private to evaluate her mental status and then help her transition out of this. Because no, I honestly don't think she should just be free of the conservatorship overnight. I'm guessing that between the chemicals that they've had her on, and the situations that they've had her in for the last 13 years, she has gone through some trauma, and she probably shouldn't be on her own overnight. But that's not to say that there aren't amazing people out there who can help her, who actually want her to heal, and that could be brought to her and help her transition out of this. So I just wanted to put that out there because it's such a big thing right now that's going on. And like I said, with my background in psychology as a Taste of the Sanctuary video, I thought this would be appropriate. So yeah, I'm, like I said, very interested to see where this goes. I really hope the judge is smart enough to recognize that any impairment in her speech during that court hearing was probably because of meds, yeah, probably because of meds she was on, not because she needs to be on more, and that she was nervous. I mean, it's the first time she was speaking to the public about the truth. And as someone pointed out in an interview that I was watching, I think it was like E.T. Canada or something like that, like, she goes and speaks out about this and goes back to her conservatorship. That's her speaking out against her abusers and then not having a safe place to go. Like, she's going back to her abusers after very publicly speaking out on her abusers. So if they really are abusing her, that's a dangerous situation and a scary situation. So I'm hoping that, you know, at the very least, they can get her. She deserves, any human being deserves to be, no matter what their situation, in a position where they feel comfortable. And yeah, she's got a lot of money. She doesn't deserve to be blackmailed because of it. And that's very obviously what's going on. I highly doubt we're going to come to find out that, oh, her dad really just had her best intentions in mind after not being involved in her life at all until he got the opportunity to lock her down in a conservatorship and be in charge of all her money. It just seems a little naive to me to think that, I mean, like I said, one of the accounts alone has $600 million in it. If that's not a red flag, I don't know what is. If getting a dementia diagnosis because you shaved your head isn't a red flag, I don't know what is. So this is a piece of our modern history, and an important one, because how we set precedents for things is involved here, really. What I meant to just say was how this works out sets precedents for so much more of anything going forward. So, yeah. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me for another Taste of the Sanctuary video. May the energy you serve you well. Go check out my Patreon. Over on Patreon have free content. I just put out my bi-monthly energy update where I do an energy update on the full and the new moons that is good for that 2 weeks, and is in general just good life advice. If you like this kind of content, the Sanctuary of the Awakened is for you. If you prefer my regular content, it's just about personal and spiritual development. I don't know what's up with me today. I am stuttering. Personal and spiritual development. If you like just that stuff, then all of my other tiers would be for you. But those who join the Sanctuary of the Awakened membership over on Patreon, that does give you access to all of my Patreon content, Sanctuary, and everything else. And if you don't want to be a part of the Sanctuary, you can just join any of the other 3 tiers. So yeah, thank you guys for joining me. Remember to hit subscribe. I hate talking about this, but I want my custom URL, and YouTube tells me I need to have more subscribers to get my custom URL. So please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. May the energy you serve you well, and let's keep making our way through.